My cousin mocked my plain gift at her extravagant birthday, but when she unwrapped it, her perfectly curated world and smile came crashing down. The air at Brianna's 25th birthday party was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. My cousin, the birthday girl, was holding court on a velvet chaise lounge, a temporary throne in her parents' ridiculously oversized living room. She was surrounded by a mountain of gifts wrapped in glossy paper and topped with bows so perfect they looked like they were made of spun sugar. I, on the other hand, felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks, nursing a glass of sparkling water and trying to make my simple black dress look intentional rather than all I could afford. My gift sat on my lap, a small, unassuming box wrapped in plain brown craft paper and tied with a simple twine bow. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in significance. Inside was something I'd spent months, not money, on. Something I thought, hoped, would mean the world to her. All right, presents time," Brianna announced, clapping her hands. Her friends, a gaggle of girls with identical blonde highlights and designer handbags, squealed in delight. For the next hour, I watched her tear through a parade of luxury. A Tiffany bracelet, a Chanel handbag, a gift certificate for a spa weekend that cost more than my rent. With each unwrapped gift, she'd let out a practiced gasp of surprise, hold it up for everyone to see, and kiss the giver on both cheeks. It was a performance, and she was the star. Finally, the pile dwindled. Brianna's eyes, bright and predatory, scanned the room and landed on me. A slow, saccharine smile spread across her face. "Oh, and look! A little package from my sweet, darling cousin." My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked over, placing the small box in her outstretched hand. The room fell quiet. Everyone was looking at my plain, brown paper wrapped gift, a stark contrast to the glittery carnage surrounding her. She held it up between two perfectly manicured fingers as if it were something distasteful. "How rustic," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. A few of her friends tittered. My aunt shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Did you get this from that little farmer's market you love so much?" Brianna continued, turning the box over. "It's so organic." The laughter was a little louder this time. My face was burning. I just wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I forced a tight smile and said, "Just open it, Bree." "Oh, I will," she purred, her eyes glinting with malice. "I can't wait to see what little homespun treasure is hiding in here." She began to unwrap it with theatrical slowness, making a show of fumbling with the simple twine bow. She tore a corner of the paper, still smirking at her friends. Then she peeled it back just enough to peek inside. The manicured smile didn't just fade, it shattered. Her perfectly glossed lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her fingers, which had been so eager to tear away the paper, were suddenly frozen mid-rip, hovering over the exposed corner of the box. The laughter in the room died instantly, replaced by a thick, confused silence. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked on whatever she had just seen. The silence stretched, thin and brittle, until it felt like it would shatter. You could see the color draining from Brianna's face, the carefully constructed mask of bored superiority cracking with every second that passed. Her friends exchanged confused glances, their own smiles faltering. "Bree? What is it?" One of them, a girl named Jessica, finally whispered, leaning forward. Brianna didn't answer. Her breath hitched. With trembling fingers, she tore the rest of the paper away. The box inside was a simple, unvarnished pine. She lifted the lid. There, nestled on a bed of faded blue velvet, was a small, leather-bound book. It was old, the dark brown leather scuffed at the corners, and the spine softened with age. On the cover, in what was once gold leaf, were two faintly visible intertwined letters, E.R. A collective, confused murmur went through the room. Jessica squinted. "Is that a diary?" Brianna still didn't speak. She lifted the book from the box as if it were a fragile, sleeping bird. Her thumb traced the initials on the cover. She opened it to a random page in the middle, and I saw the familiar, elegant cursive that I had spent the last 6 months painstakingly preserving. It was our grandmother's recipe book, but it was so much more than that. Grandma Eleanor didn't just write down ingredients and instructions. In the margins, on the backs of pages, tucked between recipes for apple pie and beef stew, she wrote her life. Little anecdotes about meeting Grandpa, her fears during the war, her joy when my mother and my aunt were born, and her private, heartfelt thoughts on her 2 granddaughters. For the past year, I had been visiting my grandfather every weekend, carefully scanning each fragile, flower-dusted page. I digitally restored the faded ink, transcribed the almost illegible notes, and even managed to repair the broken spine of the original book. The gift wasn't just the book itself, it was the preservation of our family's heart. Brianna's perfectly sculpted shoulders began to shake. A single perfect tear traced a path through her expensive foundation. She slammed the book shut with a loud crack that made everyone jump. "It's just an old book," someone muttered, breaking the spell. That was it. That was the final straw. Brianna shot to her feet, the mountain of designer gifts tumbling off her lap and onto the floor in a mess of torn paper and ribbon. She let out a choked sob, a raw, ugly sound that didn't belong in this pristine, perfect room. Without another word, she turned and fled, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor as she ran up the grand staircase and disappeared. The party was over. A stunned silence descended upon the room, broken only by the quiet clinking of an ice cube in someone's glass. All eyes were on me, a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and pity. I stood there, frozen, the empty wrapping paper at my feet. Then my aunt, Brianna's mother, rose from her seat. Her face, which usually held a look of placid contentment, was a storm cloud of fury. She marched over to the chaise lounge, snatched the leather book from where Brianna had dropped it, and stormed over to me. She held it up to my face, her knuckles white. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "What did you do to my daughter?" I stared at my Aunt Carol, my hand instinctively going to my chest. I didn't do anything," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "It's Grandma Eleanor's recipe book. I had it restored for her." "Restored?" she scoffed, her voice laced with venom. Her eyes darted around at the remaining guests, who were all watching this family drama unfold with wide, unblinking eyes. "You did this on purpose. You've always been jealous of Brianna, ever since you were little girls. You couldn't stand to see her happy on her birthday, so you had to find a way to ruin it." My shock quickly curdled into anger. Jealous? I was the one who spent my childhood being compared to Brianna, my straight-A report cards against her pageant trophies, my quiet hobbies against her popular girl status. I was never good enough. "That's not true," I said, my voice finding its strength. "I thought she would love it. It's a piece of our history, a piece of Grandma." "Don't you dare bring my mother into this," she snapped, her face contorting with rage. She lunged forward and tried to snatch the book from my hands. I held on tight, pulling it back to my chest. "It was a gift," I cried out. "Why would you think I'd try to hurt her?" "Because you're cruel," she spat, her eyes welling with tears of fury. "You wanted to humiliate her. What horrible thing did you write in there? What lie did you plant to upset her? That's when it clicked. She didn't know. She hadn't read the book either. She just assumed I was malicious. The injustice of it all, after the months of love and care I had poured into this project, made my blood boil." "I didn't write anything," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Every word in that book is Grandma Eleanor's. And if Brianna ran out of here crying, maybe it's because for the first time in her life, she read the truth." Aunt Carol froze. "What? What truth?" I took a deep breath, the eyes of a dozen strangers burning into me. "I found an entry she wrote on Brianna's 10th birthday. It was tucked into the back of the recipe for her famous angel food cake. Do you remember? The one she always made for Brianna's birthday." My aunt simply stared, her mouth slightly agape. I didn't need to open the book. I had memorized the words. "Grandma wrote about how much she loved you both," I began, my voice clear and ringing in the silent room. But she also wrote about her fears. She wrote, "I see so much of my own mother's spirit in my younger granddaughter, her quiet strength, her deep kindness. But I worry for Brianna. Carol pushes her to value things that are as hollow as the beautiful shells she collects by the shore. I pray her heart does not become as empty as them." A collective gasp went through the room. Aunt Carol's face went from flushed with anger to a ghostly, mottled white. She looked like I had struck her. "You're lying," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. The words had hit their mark. She knew deep down that it sounded exactly like her mother. Before I could say another word, a deep voice boomed from the top of the staircase. "Carol? What in God's name is going on down here?" My Uncle Mark, Brianna's father, stood there, his face a thundercloud. He had clearly been drawn out by the shouting. His sharp eyes flickered from his pale, trembling wife to me, clutching the old leather book. "What is she talking about?" he demanded, descending the stairs. "What empty heart?" Aunt Carol opened her mouth, ready to paint me as the villain, but my Uncle Mark held up a hand, silencing her with a single sharp gesture. He reached the bottom of the stairs and walked over to his wife, his face unreadable. He gently took the leather-bound book from her trembling hands. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the wine fridge in the kitchen. He didn't look at me. He simply opened the book. His eyes scanned the page I had quoted, and I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. But he didn't stop there. He turned another page, and then another. He was reading the little notes Grandma had scribbled next to her recipe for Sunday roast, the story of how she'd burned the first meal she ever made for Grandpa. He read about her pride when my mother got into college and her simple joy watching her two young daughters, Carol and my mom, playing in the yard. The hard lines on his face began to soften. This wasn't just a book of recipes. It was a conversation with the woman he had loved and respected as his own mother. He was seeing the whole person, not just the one damning sentence. After a long minute, he closed the book softly. He looked at my aunt, his eyes full of a new, sad understanding. "Carol," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She wasn't being cruel. She was worried. And maybe she had a reason to be." He then turned his gaze to me, and for the first time that night, I didn't see judgment. I saw a hint of gratitude. "This was a thoughtful gift," he said, the words a balm on my raw nerves. Just then, we heard a soft shuffle of slippered feet on the stairs. Brianna stood there, halfway down, clutching a tissue in her hand. Her makeup was ruined, her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, and her designer dress looked like a costume she couldn't wait to take off. She was no longer the untouchable princess on her throne. She just looked like a lost 25-year-old girl. "She's right, Dad," Brianna whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Everyone turned to look at her. "I wasn't crying because she was mean." She took another step down, her eyes fixed on me. "I was crying because when I read Grandma's words, I knew she was right." She walked over to me, past her stunned mother and her solemn father. She reached out and took the book from her dad's hands. "I've spent my whole life collecting things," she said, her voice cracking. "Purses, shoes, friends. I thought that's what made me valuable. I laughed at your gift because it didn't have a brand name, because it looked cheap." She opened the book again, this time to the very first page, where Grandma had written her name, Eleanor Rose, in beautiful looping script. A fresh tear rolled down her cheek. And then I opened it, and it was the only thing I've ever been given that has any real value at all. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a sincerity I had never seen before. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Thank you." I just nodded, my own throat too tight to speak. My aunt was silent, her face a mixture of shame and disbelief. The remaining party guests began to quietly excuse themselves, sensing this was a private family moment. In the end, it was just the four of us standing in the wreckage of a birthday party, surrounded by a mountain of glossy, meaningless boxes. My little brown paper package had done more than just silence the room. It had finally made them listen. It wasn't a cheap gift, after all. It was priceless, and for the first time, they all knew it.